Getting tongue tied. Apocalyptic. The minimalization. Hey, and welcome back to the Ruby Tuesday. My name is Ruben. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today we're going to be diving deep into the gritty and gnarly and surprisingly poignant post-apocalyptic world. Remember to breathe. Azrael, the new film starring Samara Weaving. You may have seen her in Ready or Not or Guns Akimbo and the two Babysitter movies on Netflix, which I absolutely love, so you know that she's no stranger to blood, guts, and high-octane insanity. But Azrael is something different. It's got this haunting stripped-down vibe that puts it in its class of its own. But is it worthwhile? And everything that I just said before, does this kind of flick your switch and go, yeah, I'm into that? Well, this is a non-spoiler review. Let's get stuck into it. So first of all, low budget, big atmosphere. Talking about the indie elephant in the room, this movie was made on a small budget of 12 million. I know 12 million actually sounds like a lot, but actually in the grand scope of things, when you're talking about Hollywood movies and the bigger TV series that are 250 million to 500 million, 12 million is just a drop. And what you can do with that, you really have to be good with your budget. And so the 12 million, you can feel that it's 12 million, but not in a bad way, in a way that works for the material. You can tell that they didn't have millions to blow on CGI or massive set pieces. But instead of feeling limited, the minimalism and locations reminiscent of folk horror feel intentional. It's more like an indie passion project than a Hollywood blockbuster. And that's one of its strengths. The practical effects, particularly the gore, have this natural tactile quality missing in much bigger budgeted Hollywood-esque movies. The creature creations are phenomenally done with prosthetics, and we're talking blood splatter that feels like it's in the room with you, or sometimes on the camera with you. It's not over-the-top comic gore either. It's grimy, brutal, and incredibly grounded. Every piece of flesh ripped apart has a tangible weight. You feel it. It's hair-raising at times in a way that gets under your skin. The non-dialogue approach, or rather, the dialogue sets Azrael apart. There is none or almost none. There are many grunts, heavy breathing, gasps, muffled screams, and noises you don't want to hear, as well as noises you can see, sound that your mind associates with a picture. Don't expect witty banter or deep monologues. In fact, this is where the movie takes a bold step. It trusts the audience to figure things out through the sound design and through its visuals. It's a storytelling style that reminds me of movies like A Quiet Place. It's almost like a silent film with 20th century aesthetics, relying on everything but the words to convey the stakes, the relationships, and the world building. Samara Weaving's performance is incredible in this context. Without dialogue, she leans heavily into the physicality, facial expressions, and raw presence. Every moment she's on screen, she's doing this delicate balance between the act of being fragile and fierce. You feel her desperation, her rage, and her fear in a way that grows throughout the film. We are on a journey with her. When she grows, we understand what she can now accomplish. Once it starts, it's a wild ride that never stops until the credits roll. And Samara Weaving is the protagonist or the conductor of this ride, survival and humanity. At its core, Azrael is about survival, which is the backbone for most post-apocalyptic films. But here it feels more personal and stripped down. There's this overwhelming sense of isolation and despair throughout the film. Yet underneath, there's this faint glimmer of hope. This thread of humanity trying to hang on. It's almost like the movie asks, how much of yourself do you really want to lose when you're constantly fighting to stay alive? How much of you is still you because of everything that you've had to go through? There's a meditative quality even when the limbs are being torn off. The action and gore, beautifully brutal. Now let's talk about the action, because I know some of you are here for the carnage, and Azrael delivers. Despite the lack of dialogue, this movie does not hold back when it comes to gore violence or body horror. It's got bursts of action that come out of nowhere, and then they're just savage. There's nothing clean or heroic about the fights that you get on screen. Every punch and stab or gunshot feels desperate and messy, like people are just barely scraping by, and survival is painful. If I had to compare it to something, it's got a bit of that Mad Max Fury Road intensity without all the Hollywood polish. There's no safety net for the characters. You feel the tension in every scene. Every time our character survives, I'm shocked because every fight is so hard won and real. Okay, so you know Samara Weaving is our protagonist, so she's probably going to survive mostly for most of the film. That being said, I was still holding my breath in places and surprised at where the film was willing to go when it came to the gore. I was tired of fighting, even though all I did was watch Samara try and survive from scene to scene. I also want to mention that the movie's gore isn't for shock value. Sure, it's gnarly and gross in places and has ASMR that will probably give you nightmares, but it's never gratuitous. It's there to remind you how fragile these characters are and how unforgiving their world is. This isn't glossy, choreographed violence of John Wick. This is just real for the most part. Mostly. Sound effects and score. A symphony of silence. Okay, this is where Azrael really shines. I think I said that a number of times, but there's a lot of shining moments in this film. In terms of atmosphere and sound design and the score, when you have almost no dialogue, the soundscape has to carry much of the narrative weight, the plot, and the characters. At times, it's carrying all of that. And it's done beautifully here. You hear every footstep, every rustle of fabric, the crunch of gravel underneath their feet, the distant howl of the wind. It's almost ASMR, but in the most terrifying way possible. It makes the world feel much more alive and much more hostile. And the score. I love the score. The music here isn't one I'd necessarily buy because it's sparse but effective, like an undercurrent of anxiety that ebbs and flows with the tension. It reminds me of something you might hear in the movie Lamb, which I highly recommend watching, which, by the way, is the same composer here. It's not so much as music as soundscapes, drones, hums, and occasional dissonant strings that spike when I guess things get really intense. The silence, when it hits, is deafening because you've had those drones and things to help carry the atmosphere, but pulling back is so brave with that silence and you feel so much more on edge because of it, which in comparison to the great editing that this film has, just heightens the tension this film is giving the audience, reminding you that you still need to breathe. I don't know if you could ever say that silence has a symphony, but I think if you're into movies like A Quiet Place or The Road or even Red Turtle, Azrael shares the DNA of minimal dialogue and atmosphere-heavy storytelling. There's a purity in its simplicity that reminds me of old school cinema, where the visual language was king and you didn't need a constant stream of exposition. I'm going to tell you every bit of the film now because I haven't shown you in the film. I hate exposition for the most part. No dialogue is a bold move when it's not a gimmick, especially in an era where most films must explain everything to the audience. It trusts you to pay attention and pick things up, pick the details up. And that's something I really appreciated. So my final thoughts, Azrael isn't going to be for everyone. If you need a heavy plot-driven narrative, you might feel lost here. But if you're into films that let the visuals, sound and performances tell the story and appreciate the artistry of it, then I think this is going to be for you. This will be a real treat. Samara Weaving absolutely kills it. Sometimes literally, and the subtle world building is rich and immersive. I do have one caveat here though. The film does expect the viewer to figure things out, to figure out what the hell is going on within this world. The beginning of the film, you are thrust right into the world knowing nothing. We have to glean the information as we go. This is fine, except there is often chaos on screen, so you may miss some world building. It also leaves you, the viewer, with questions. There was a reveal that blew my mind, and because it had never been addressed in the film, I began questioning myself. Had I missed something, and was the reveal not the massive thing I thought it was? Repeat viewings may be necessary with this movie. The low budget gives it a gritty indie charm, but the craftsmanship, especially in the action and sound design, elevate it into something special. It's a meditative, brutal, and haunting experience that'll stick with you long after the credits roll. Mostly because you probably still have questions, because this is a film that has been done before, but the way it's put together, I really enjoyed. I give Azrael 4 out of 5 Nic Cages.
And you got one.
So yeah, that's my review for Azrael. Definitely check it out if you're in the mood for something raw and visceral and just a little bit off the beaten path. Thanks for watching, and remember, live long on Tuesday.